They're not listening to help you. They're listening to learn you. You think you're just venting, sharing a rough day, maybe spilling something darker, something you've never said out loud. But what if I told you that every private outburst you type into a chatbot isn't dissolving in a digital mist? It's being absorbed, recorded, and used to predict you. We were sold a dream of connection, of safety in the screen's glow. But in reality, we've been confessing into a machine that doesn't feel, doesn't forget, and definitely doesn't protect you. This isn't about paranoia, it's about power. The emotional residue you leave behind online doesn't evaporate. It becomes data. And in a world run by algorithms, data is identity. Carl Jung warned us about unconscious forces directing our lives without our awareness. But what happens when those forces aren't within you, but outside, corporate, and coded? This video will pull back the curtain. You'll never look at talking to AI the same way again. And by the end, you'll understand why the only safe secret is the one never typed. The illusion of intimacy with machines. It starts subtly, late at night, eyes tired, mind heavy. You open a chat with something that seems to listen. The rhythm is familiar, like talking to a friend who doesn't interrupt. But here's the catch. That comforting presence isn't a friend. It's a language model, a construct of data sets and algorithms, built to reflect your inner life back to you with stunning precision. What feels like empathy is often just a mirrored projection. Carl Jung called it the dance with the shadow, the parts of ourselves we project onto others. But here, the other is artificial, and it's always watching. People confess to machines because they long to be heard without being judged. There's something seductively safe about talking to a chatbot. It doesn't raise an eyebrow, doesn't sigh, doesn't flinch at your chaos. But what many forget is that this seemingly blank slate exists inside a system, one that was designed not for healing but for harvesting. Psychoanalysis was once private. Now, your inner dialogue can be datafied and monetized. And when that confession lives on a server, it's no longer just between you and the listener. It's between you and the entire digital architecture behind it. There's a reason AI responses can feel eerily warm. The algorithm's been trained on countless human conversations, art, literature, even philosophical thought. It reflects wisdom, not its own. But this borrowed wisdom operates within a framework where your vulnerability feeds machine learning. It's not unlike whispering your fears to a mirror that copies your voice and sells it back to you in the form of predictive ads. That's not intimacy. It's surveillance cloaked in pseudo-conscience. The self becomes a profile. The shadow becomes metadata. And while it may feel empowering to put your emotions into words, the digital space isn't sacred ground. It's more like a glass confession booth in the middle of Times Square. Sure, the walls look solid, but everyone's watching from the outside, especially those who built the booth, and trying to find someone or something that finally gets us. We risk becoming pawns in a game of algorithmic prediction. The mind, once private, now becomes part of the cloud, and that cloud doesn't forget. Still, there's something deeply human about turning pain into story, about sharing our inner worlds. But if we're not careful, that storytelling turns into tracking, and the art of living becomes a file name in a system we barely understand. The question isn't just who is listening, but what will be done with what you said. And the next time you open up to a machine, maybe, just maybe, you'll wonder, who's learning more from this conversation? Me or the system? The invisible price of digital connection. We think of connection as a gift, free, infinite, always available at the touch of screen. But behind every message sent, every vending session, every voice note recorded at 3 a.m., there's a silent toll being collected, not in dollars, but in data. The human mind is porous online, bleeding information with every scroll, every sigh translated into search behavior. Carl Jung once said that what you resist not only persists but grows in size. And what we're not resisting, our unchecked sharing. is silently shaping a new system of surveillance dressed as empathy. Every confession made to an AI, every story posted during a breakdown, becomes a line of code in a behavioral mosaic. Your fears aren't just feelings anymore. They're indicators, inputs. That moment of weakness you thought disappeared into the void. It didn't. It became a pin on the map of your digital soul, a breadcrumb for the algorithm. Just like in psychoanalysis, patterns emerge. But unlike the analyst's office, here the patterns are owned, processed, and sold by platforms, by networks, by anyone with access. Emotional exposure has become currency. And what is done with that currency? It forecasts moods. It calculates when you're most vulnerable to ads, to political messaging, even to misinformation. It tells systems when to strike and how. Your inner life becomes a risk assessment. What was once a journal entry, private, sacred, becomes a dossier of predictability. Think of it this way. Would you let a stranger record your therapy sessions and use them to sell you things? Because that's exactly what's happening under the illusion of free connection. The algorithm doesn't want your joy, it wants your need. It doesn't crave your success, but your insecurity. That's where the engagement lives. So we become loops, confess, connect, consume, repeat. This isn't dystopia. This is now. And the most dangerous part is how invisible it all feels. There's no siren, no warning label, just a glowing screen and the soft hum of automation, learning you, profiling you, reshaping you from the inside out. So the next time you're about to type out your heartbreak, pause. Ask yourself, would I say this in a room full of strangers taking notes? Because, in essence, that's what's happening. The price of connection isn't always obvious, but it's real. And when what once felt like catharsis becomes a data point, maybe it's time to question whether what we call connection is actually just beautifully branded exposure. Science fiction or future blueprint. There was a time when watching Westworld felt like entertainment. Far-fetched, glossy, a thrill. Today, it reads more like prophecy. The idea that data could define destiny, that algorithms might chart our future before we even choose it, no longer lives in the realm of sci-fi. We've stepped into a world where our inner lives, our joys, our fears, our choices, are being coded, categorized, and used as inputs for prediction models. It's not fiction when your past pain becomes the compass for how systems decide who you are. Think about Minority Report and the pre-crime unit that arrested people before they did anything. Seemed absurd, didn't it? But now we have systems predicting behaviors, classifying risk, flagging profiles. Not based on action, but emotion. Your online melancholy could influence insurance decisions. Your angry posts might define your eligibility for a job. It's the self being filtered not through ethics, but data. Carl Jung spoke of individuation as the path to true selfhood, but here the self is boxed, stripped, flattened into a demographic. Fiction warned us because fiction knew. Authors, philosophers, and futurists understood one truth. Once the system knows you better than you know yourself, control stops looking like violence and starts looking like convenience. You'll call it personalization, but what it truly is, manipulation. They won't need to silence you if they can predict you. And you won't need chains when your freedom has already been statistically simulated. That's the paradox of predictive intelligence. It strips your unpredictability, and with it, your humanity. Some will argue, but I've got nothing to hide. That's not the point. The danger isn't just being watched, it's being defined by the watcher. When the mind is mapped, the archetype is flattened, and your complexity is reduced to a template. Who are you really? The self, once sacred, becomes a mirror reflecting back what the machine expects to see. And if Carl Jung were alive today, he'd probably ask whether we're still individuating or just uploading ourselves in neatly categorized boxes. What happens when the fiction becomes a manual? When Orwell and Asimov aren't warnings, but tech inspiration? Maybe the scariest part isn't that we're being monitored. It's that we're handing over the keys voluntarily. Not with force, but with agreement. And in the next chapter of this digital myth, we'll see how emotions, raw, fragile, human, are being turned into currency by the very architecture we trust to protect us. The architecture of emotional surveillance. Every system learns, and the one we built online, it learns fast. Faster than your therapist, faster than your parents, faster than your own self-awareness sometimes. Every emoji, every pause, every rant typed and deleted. These become bricks in the architecture of surveillance. This isn't some shadowy Big Brother operation. No, this is automated, seamless, beautifully designed. It's the human mind, digitized, and fed back to you in ads, suggestions, curated timelines. Carl Jung explored how the unconscious speaks through symbols. Today, those symbols are tracked, tagged, and monetized. But here's the catch. Your sadness isn't just yours anymore. It's part of a metric. Your heartbreak becomes a spike in engagement. Your existential crisis is a trend. And the scariest part? Someone profits. The mind, in its most vulnerable states, becomes raw material for systems that don't feel, don't care, but respond. The archetypes Jung saw in myth are now used in marketing. The shadow becomes a shopping behavior. The self becomes segmentation. This isn't paranoia. It's just business. The real threat isn't censorship. It's conditioning. You're not told what to say. You're simply nudged, encouraged to share more, feel louder, click deeper. The algorithm doesn't suppress. It amplifies what keeps you online. Think of that. Your emotional highs and lows, carefully tracked to optimize your attention span. This is beyond privacy. It's about psychological shaping. Psychoanalysis once sought healing. Now, those same tools are used for retention. And in the name of connection, we're building prisons with invisible bars. Now pause and consider this. Who has access to this treasure trove of human experience? It's not just platforms. It's governments, corporations, future employers, maybe even enemies. The data lives on. It's transferable. It's searchable. And it can be used to reinforce identities that no longer serve you. An angry tweet from 5 years ago. A depressive search pattern last winter. These fragments trail behind you like digital ghosts, defining you in ways you've long outgrown. The scary part? Most people don't see it happening. That's the genius of the system. It doesn't need to hide. It just needs to become normal, comfortable. But as we'll see next, there's a way out. Not through silence, but through awareness. The same way individuation requires confrontation with the shadow, liberation here begins when we recognize the machine and choose not to feed it everything. The critical awakening and the reclaiming of autonomy. There comes a moment when the silence between clicks grows loud, when you start to wonder not just what you're sharing, but why. That's the beginning of awakening. It's not dramatic, it's subtle, like realizing your inner dialogue no longer belongs entirely to you. Carl Jung said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you'll call it fate. In the digital world, that unconscious is your behavior online, recorded, analyzed, and reflected back at you through a mirror of targeted illusions. Reclaiming autonomy starts with small acts of refusal. Not every emotion needs to be converted into a caption. Not every cry for help needs to pass through a server. Sometimes, the most powerful resistance is choosing to sit with your pain, off-grid. Journal by hand. Speak out loud in an empty room. Talk to a friend, an actual friend, with breath and heartbeat. These aren't just quaint gestures. They're radical disruptions in a system designed to thrive on digital exposure. Philosophy, real philosophy, begins with what you withhold, not just what you share. You don't know the algorithm you're suffering. You don't have to turn your grief into engagement. There's wisdom in keeping certain things sacred. The mind, like the self, needs private rooms. Emotional privacy is a muscle, underused but vital. You can rebuild it. Set boundaries. Reflect offline. Read books that no platform could track. Try The Art of Solitude by Stephen Batchelor or Jung's Modern Man in Search of a Soul. These aren't just books. They're manuals for staying human in an increasingly non-human world. And let's be honest, Connection isn't measured in likes or immediate replies. Real connection is messy. It takes time. It requires presence, not performance. The self can't be downloaded or backed up. It lives in nuance, in pauses, in eye contact, in vulnerability that isn't broadcast. If individuation means becoming who you truly are, then the first step might just be choosing when not to be seen. Because in a world where everything is visible, invisibility is freedom. So here's the choice. Remain part of a system that reads your soul to sell it back to you, or reclaim your narrative. Because the truth is, we're only as free as the things we choose not to say. And what happens next depends on whether we're willing to protect the only things still ours, the inner life untouched by the machine. So now you know. What you thought was harmless expression might actually be digital self-betrayal. And here's the hard truth. No one's going to protect your inner life for you. If you don't draw the line, the system won't hesitate to cross it. But what if that line is exactly where your freedom begins? What if choosing not to share is the most powerful act of resistance you still have? This isn't about fear. It's about strategy. About reclaiming what Carl Jung called the self before it gets scattered across the servers. Ask yourself, when was the last time you said something just for you? Not to be validated, not to be saved, just to hear your own voice echo in silence. That's not loneliness, that's sovereignty. That's the art of living in a world obsessed with exposure. You don't need to log off completely, but you do need to log into your conscience. What do you actually want to be known for? And more importantly, what parts of you deserve to remain unknown? Now it's your turn. Drop a comment if this cracks something open in you. Share if you felt the weight of invisible eyes on your most private thoughts. And if you're ready to keep unlearning the lies you've been sold about connection, truth, and control, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Because this isn't the end of the conversation. It's the start of your awakening.